Welcome to you all. I've got a karakia to use to start our meeting. So, tu tawa mai I runga, te tawa mai I raro, tu tawa mai I waho, tu tawa mai I roto. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora ki te katoa, hau mai hui e te aki e. Ka pai. Thank you. I'd like to firstly just ask for any apologies. Are there any apologies for the meeting? Councillor Jenny is an apology. We'll note that. Do we need to? Thank you. Thank you. And are there any declarations of interest as we start the meeting? Oh, sorry. I'll move the motion then to everybody in favour of accepting the apologies. Anyone against? Passed, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest in relation to the papers today? No. Thank you, no declarations of interest. And the confirmation of the minutes from the 8th of June. Thank you, Mayor Andrew. And a seconder, thank you, Peter. All those in favour? It's carried. Anyone against? Carried, thank you. Okay, welcome to Brett, our partner from PwC, and Cameron from PwC as well. Would you like to come and join us around the table? Thank you, Mike, for the draft Treasury policies and the work that you've done with PwC on the policies. There is a presentation, is there? Yeah, okay. So we'll take the presentation, pass over to you, Brett, and then we'll open up for discussion and questions. Yes. Oh, the presentation is on Diligent if anybody wants to read it there. Thank you. Mike, did you want to say anything to start? No. Okay, so thank you. Welcome.
Thank you for the introduction, and pleased to be here today. Just a short presentation that talks to the investment and liability management policies, which we've recently reviewed as part of that 3-yearly review process. As by way of introduction to the policies, I'll just talk through the risk framework in which Council captures and manages its Treasury risks that come from doing what Council does in its everyday business. So, in terms of the risk framework, and this manifests itself in the liability management and investment policies, and that's a statutory requirement that all councils need to have a policy framework. Some of the sort of key objectives of that policy is very much a stewardship and intergenerational focus. So when we're thinking about the decisions we make around our Treasury risks, and we'll talk about liquidity risk and interest rate risk and debt funding risk, we need to take care around those decisions. They need to be well judged, and they need to be considering not only the current impact on the current ratepayer base, but also the future ratepayer base, hence the intergenerational focus. And that ties in very much into your long-term planning cycle through your long-term asset management plans and your LTPs, which is a 10-year time horizon, which is sort of coming up now for its review. By having this risk framework, it gives comfort to stakeholders, to Council, and to ensure that you're running a professional Treasury function in a controlled environment. So When we think about stakeholders, we think about the LGFA, where council will fund or raise most of its debt, the bank lenders to council ratepayers, auditors, trustees, and obviously your credit rating agency, Standard & Poor's. So the risk framework provides the safeguards for council, so access to cash when you need it, so paying your bills on time, the ability to raise sort of long-term debt and renewal debt to fund your intergenerational assets, and supports council's long-term plan and financial strategy, and also provides support in terms of your planned borrowing costs, and spreads and smooths your adjustments to what is happening around the financial markets, very much external to council, but very much part of how our council funds its long-term balance sheet over time. And last point there, there's a requirement within the policy, the delegations and discretions that have been given to management to operate within the policy. There's a duty to report back to the risk committee and to council around monitoring performance to the policy. So that's the risk framework, and as I mentioned, it manifests itself in the liability management investment policies that we're reviewing. In terms of some of the key risks embedded within the policy, limits, borrowing limits or financial covenants that you need to adhere to allow you to access the LGFA for your short-term and long-term borrowing requirements. I've just put those up on the slide there in terms of what are your sort of current limits, so they should be familiar to you. The first one there is a debt capacity limit relative to council's total annual revenue. The second two are net interest expense measured against total revenue and annual rates, and then the liquidity ratio, which ensures that you've got a certain amount of borrowing capacity which you will leave unutilised in the event that you would need it for some event or occasion. And you'll see when Cameron talks through the changes that we've suggested within the policy review, that these limits are considered as you review the financial strategy and long-term plan. In particular, the net interest expense type measures, given the change in market interest rates over the last sort of 18 months. They are higher based on what the Reserve Bank is doing around tightening monetary conditions, and that will have an impact on council's borrowing costs going forward. So it may well be that some of these limits percentages need to change, of course, within the maximum limit that the LGFA prescribes upon you as a borrower from the LGFA. So we'll talk about that slightly later, but I just sort of wanted to raise that point at this juncture. The next slide is debt forecasts, and I put this slide up here because this is the core input into the ongoing Treasury decisions that council makes, and when we're meeting with management in our monthly meetings, it's a core focus of ours. Around Treasury management, we are looking forward, not back, and so it's important for us to have timely and as accurate as possible debt forecasts, and those debt forecasts are driven by the underlying capital program and maintenance program that council has around its assets, and that sort of flows through into your debt forecasts. We have three scenarios, and again, when we talk about the suggested changes to the policy, very much there's a base forecast that we manage the risk to, and that is what we call a haircutted debt forecast, looking out the next 10 years, and that's that yellow line there. And it's essentially taking the LTP forecast from 2021, and it's taking and making an adjustment to that. And that adjustment is related to carry forwards, you know, what's happened in the past in terms of the delivery of the capital program. It may be that we're not going to be able to deliver all the program that we'd previously planned for or budgeted for. So we don't want to be thinking about raising that debt or managing the interest rate risk on that debt until we've got a little bit more certainty around delivering that program. And this is not inconsistent with what we observe across the local government sector. It's not inconsistent with the rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, in terms of that they look at LTP and long-term forecasts. And the third scenario there is affordable waters, 3 waters. And that's, again, regulatory change, significant regulatory change that's coming up for the sector. Already now we're starting to think about 3 waters, what's the impact that will have on councils' debt forecasts, and should it sort of move ahead, how much existing debt is water-related debt and how much of that would transfer to a new water entity. Obviously within these forecasts, these assumptions, and we can only sort of use the best information that management has at a particular point in time. Obviously when we talk about affordable waters, there's an election coming up. There's still details within that program that need to be sort of finalised, but it's important for management and for council just think about what the future looks like when we're making medium to long-term decisions around debt raising and managing that long-term interest rate risk. So some of the changes that we've recommended for the policy is just to give management the flexibility to, yes, agree what the base debt forecast is, but in any decision that we make, we're going to scenario test and flex that to see that we don't get ourselves into an uncomfortable position should another debt forecast eventuate. And the only thing that really is certain for us in terms of looking into the future is change. Things will be different when we get there. So we just got to be mindful of that when we make these long-term decisions. If we move on to the next slide, this should be familiar to you. This is the current debt portfolio of council, and one of the objectives set within the policy framework is to spread and smooth your risk, so that we take remove concentration of risk, and so we don't find ourselves funding a high proportion of council's balance sheet in a market that is disrupted. And a good example of that was we roll back to the pandemic and COVID, and the markets did get disrupted. And generally find that the shocks that come through our funding markets and our financial markets are very much coming from external. And there's obviously ramifications for long-term debt funders like the LGFA and like the local government sector. So we spread our risk in terms of existing debt. We're refinancing that over a period of time, and we're raising our new debt over a period of time. So this page sort of captures some of the key policy limits that you've got. You can see green is good. So there's a liquidity measure there. You can see it's 116% versus 110%. So we want to be above that 110% measure, and that's a measure that the LGFA requires council to manage its liquidity position to. And then just below that is a funding summary saying that, you know, of our debt, we want it spreading over a period of time. So 0 to 3 years, 3 to 7 years, 7 to 10 years. You can see how the debt is maturing over those different time bands. So yes, green there. One of the things that we do when we sort of get together and talk about all things Treasury is we project the risk position forward. So what's the future going to look like in terms of policy compliance? And you can see way at the top there, top left, that's August 2023. We've got the ability to say, oh, what's the position going to be like in September, December, June 24, say. And then we're thinking about the way that the debt portfolio ages over time, so we don't make a decision today which may frustrate our compliance to the liability management policy where this limit is captured within. And the next slide is, again, we manage our debt and our interest rate risk separately. Again, the policy is encouraging a spreading and smoothing of risk, so we don't have all of our interest rate risk repricing at any point in time. We have to be within those bands there. You can see that the grey corridor of step down limit system, a maximum and a minimum there, and we've got a block of orange there, which is our fixed rate debt. When we look out into the future, we've got certainty around that level of debt, and we continue to manage that over time. You can see up there, there's some ribbons there with different debt forecasts. So we're thinking about what does that debt forecast look like, and the risk position from an LTP perspective, from that 80% of LTP perspective, and also that Three Waters debt forecast that you saw earlier. So these are the sort of key areas of risk that we manage. That's captured within the policy. It requires us to manage that risk within those risk limits. So that's liquidity, debt management, and interest rate risk management. So if we move into the policies, the liability management policies and the investment policy. So I'll just hand over to Cam at this point.
Cheers. Thank you, Brett. So we, as Brett has talked about, we reviewed both the investment policy and the liability management policy, and both policies still remain fit for purpose and in line with other regional peers and similar councils with similar credit ratings, and so there are a fairly minimal significant changes that are made throughout. So I'll just touch on a couple of the ones that we have made. And firstly, they probably come down to just reflecting current practice within the regular meetings that Brett talked about. And so this is under interest rate risk, allowing management to consider alternative debt forecast scenarios when designing strategies. So this is how he talked about switching between different scenarios and different debt forecasts, i.e. the Three Waters or affordable waters, and just seeing how a strategy would be impacted by if debt was to significantly change, but noting in mind that we do continue to report to the baseline approved debt forecast. These are just there so that we can make decisions with most information available to us at a time. And then also around interest rate risk, how the debt that is being on lent to CCOs, CCTOs is managed and the interest rate risk that associated with that. So if there's any debt in the debt forecast that is on lent, that will be managed towards, but if down the track there isn't any debt or it is fixed rate in nature, it wouldn't be considered. So we've just wouldn't be managed, because it is being back to back with already being fixed rate. So it's sort of changes around current practice within the interest rate framework. And then within the liquidity, and hopefully I can, scroll down. The liquidity and funding risk, similar to sort of within current practice, we've just sort of defined how pre-funding is calculated, and within the funding profile. And pre-funding is a practice that is approved and very much high regarded by S&P, and that is when there's debt maturing, raising new debt in advance of that, holding it on term deposit with the intention of earmarking it to repay that debt. So for example, if council had debt maturing in 6 months' time, raising debt early and putting it on term deposit, and this is already something that is within the Treasury policy is allowed. It's just sort of explaining how the calculations are and the risk of that debt is managed. And similarly, any CCTO debt, how that is handled within the framework, and that is if there's any debt that's been raised on behalf of council and on lent, that is a risk that council will manage, because the debt is in council's name, so that is included within those profiles. So both of those two changes are probably just sort of formalising sort of the current practice. And one of the other changes we've looked at is the counterparty credit limits. And so these are bank counterparties which council has exposure to through either term deposits or bank call accounts, but also the derivative instruments which are used to put that profile that Brett had for interest rate risk management through interest rate swaps to hedge against floating interest rate. And the current Treasury policy has a maximum limit per count for a AA rate counterparty of 30 or 30, it's simply a minus, sorry, of 30 million. But it's got sort of a designation for investments and for the derivatives. So we're not changing the total limit, we're just suggesting to remove the sub-limit so that council and management has the discretion to choose whether they hold slightly more term deposits or derivatives with any singular bank, so that the total limit remains unchanged, but it sits within sort of a little bit more flexibility. And this also links into that pre-funding when there might be a larger term deposit being placed with any given bank. Because of an upcoming debt maturity, it just allows a little bit more flexibility for choosing sort of the banks that are providing the greatest in term deposit rates and sort of able to work within that framework as best as possible.
So maybe I'll just I'll sum up now, and then we can open up for questions. Yeah. Look, if we just pass over to the next page, it's sort of there, isn't it? I think that in terms of the ongoing management of these risks, we have a proactive approach, so we're always looking ahead. And at our monthly Treasury meetings with management, we are very much focusing on council's business and council's debt forecasts. How are they changing? And using the functionality within the Treasury tool to project the risk position forward and scenario test current risk positions and strategies to policy compliance. So we do take a medium-term to long-term approach, given the long-term planning cycle of council, and obviously bearing in mind those sort of key strategic objectives, statutory objectives around, focusing on the current ratepayer base, but also future ratepayer base impact. Affordable waters, gosh, it's hard to get any sort of high degree of certainty at the moment, but we need to be mindful of that when we're thinking about, as I say, those medium to long-term debt raising and interest rate risk management decisions. So what's the best decision we can make with the information we have available to us? So that does pose some challenges for council and also the sector at the moment. Just we need some more certainty around detail. And we think also about what other factors are influencing those debt forecasts. And again, as we're seeing right across the sector, is the delivery of capital programs obviously increasing cost to deliver a capital projects at the moment. So that's causing councils, the sector, to reconfigure their capital spending programs, and that obviously influences debt forecasts as well. So very much taking a sort of conservative view, it's fair to say, in the debt forecasts in terms of managing our debt, liquidity and interest rate risks. So probably best I just leave it there for the time being, and happy to take questions around Treasury management or the policy changes at this point. Mike? Yeah.
Yep, that's great. Thank you for your presentation. That was very thorough. I will just open up for questions now because I do think we've probably got some.
Yeah.
So I'll open up for questions. Any questions, anybody? Mike Timmer?
Mike.
Sorry, I had a couple of questions. There's one or two typos in here that I'll feed back to Mike, and you can fix those later. But the question I had is a performance benchmark. You put up on the slide there, you showed us some tramways with where the interest rate risk is, and there's a degree of discretion in the policy whether you hedge to the maximum level, you hedge to the minimum level. There's also a degree there, obviously, as you say, where the cash flows are. However, that said, I think council would want to consider whether they want to have a benchmark in there, because having a benchmark in there determines whether shows whether the Treasury function is managing its interest rate risk in an effective way, given that there's a degree of discretion. And I just think, personally, I think that would be something useful that you might want to consider. I know that you don't have a fully functioning Treasury, but you have outsourced it to PwC. So, in some ways, PwC is then having a monitoring regime put over what they are recommending to you.
Do we have a response to that at present, Mike or Brett? Yeah, or should we take it away to come back to?
I'm happy to.
Thank you.
Happy to respond. So in terms of performance measurement, so the existing policy does have some in there, and they're benchmarked against budgeted interest costs and the raising of borrowing amounts. So Mike is referring to a market-related benchmark, and yeah, absolutely there is the ability to put that into the policy, and the worth of that benchmark is and it's very much used by sort of more active sort of Treasury functions, where you say if we stayed at the mid policy, and this is purely looking at the wholesale interest rate risk management policy, what would be the hedge rate that would have been achieved? So taking a very mechanical approach to managing interest rate risk, and then what was council's actual hedge rate, and that takes into consideration the fixed rate achieved, but also the floating rate component of your interest rate cost. And that could be useful because what you can do is you generally would look back probably 2 years, and it's a historical measure. And what sorts of things you look for from a governance perspective is the trend of your interest costs. Like you'd be sort of concerned if market interest rates were going down and your market interest rate was going up. So you look at your trend, and then yes, where your rate is relative to the market rate. So it could be a useful addition to the policy.
And I think you could possibly do it on your monetary investments as well, although I don't know exactly what they all are, and they're probably minor, so it may not be applicable.
Sorry, what we'll do from here is these questions or suggestions coming through will then liaise with PwC about whether it's appropriate, and if so, how it should go in the policy, and then the recommendations from this committee, whether we put them in there or not, will go to the Strategy Committee when they adopt the policy.
Right. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Sorry, I just had one other thing that potentially could be put into the policy. There's a section in the Local Government Act, Section 14, I think it's Section 14(1) FE or something to that effect, which talks about looking at regularly reviewing your investments. So what it's saying is you periodically should look at your investments and say, this is a formal process that council has to go through. Look at the investments and you make a report and you say, oh, is it still effective to have GasNet, or is it effective to have money on deposit the way we do for our earthquake fund or excess for our insurance? Are these investments all effective? And is it the thing we want? So I think it would be quite good to put that under the investment policy. And I know from my own experience, I haven't seen it in council policies, but it did occur to me when I was looking through here yesterday, oh, that's something that possibly could be in here. So I'll just leave it with Brett. I don't know what you guys think, and do you see it in other policies, or is it something that's been overlooked? Or am I on the wrong track?
Any response from Brett?
Certainly the Act requires a review of the policies every 3 years.
Yep.
And I suppose within the policies is the list of investments, isn't it? So I think that's how
There's a
the
special
Act
section in the Act that says that you must review your investments periodically.
periodically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could
Yeah.
I?
So I think that's a useful, it's
Yeah.
an important
Is
discipline.
it, I mean, I'm not sure whether you have it in any other policies in councils. In my experience dealing with councils, generally they don't. And it just occurred to me when I was reading this, maybe that's something this is the place to put it.
Could we again take that away and consider that, and we'll have it on our action list as well, and whatever the decision or recommendations are out of this will come back to us and to the Strategy and Policy Committee. Yeah? That work?
Perhaps just in a quick response, we are undertaking the CCO review at the moment, which is a review of our major investments, so we are doing that.
Yep.
But having something like that in the policy, there's no reason we couldn't put it in there. So again, we'll take it away, and
it just gives accountability and then ownership, and then at least you know you can say you've done it, or
Thank you, Mike. Mayor Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Brett, and thank you, Cameron. So just a few questions of clarification, really, and process. So the first question is really around, in the first paragraph that you've talked about review, in line with the long-term plan process. So my question is that done every 3 years or 10 years? 3 years, is it? Yep. Okay.
Yeah, 3 years.
Just for okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Second question, under key information, it talks about prudently managed. So you mentioned the word prudently managed. So that is not an audit, and it's not a review either. So my question, it might maybe goes back to council officers, but I assume that both the liability management policy and investment policy are audited. Is that correct?
No, they're not audited.
Okay. Do they need to be, or? And
no,
if,
they don't
if
need
not,
to be.
why not?
There's no legislative requirement for them to be audited.
Okay.
Certainly, audits in New Zealand would look at our policies, but they don't form an opinion on them.
Right. Okay. So, therefore, the enactment and the interpretation of the policy, and from a management perspective, is that managed under a normal audit? So, a policy is a policy. So then it's enacted and interpreted in such a way and put into as an operational matter.
Look, good question. I think from Whanganui Council and across the sector, we contract Treasury advisors to advise us on best practice, which Brett and Cameron have spoken about today. But also as far as how we manage Treasury management is also reviewed by Standard & Poor's, LGFA, the banks, all the lending institutions cast their eye over our policies. The ANZ Bank will ask for our policy as well. So we have a lot of eyes over that policy. It does reflect best practice, what's happening in the sector.
Yep, great, no, thank you. Third question is, and it's my checking my understanding of this, but the debt you had a slide up there which showed the debt forecast, and you had it by absolute numbers. You had 3 scenarios there. So is there I personally think it'd be useful to have a percentage of the debt cap in there as well. Is that something, is there a reason why that's not done? Because in absolute terms, two numbers could look the same. So excluding 3 waters might be a different, you'd assume would be a different debt cap percentage.
Yes, there is actually a page within the Treasury tool that does articulate that.
Right.
I don't know whether that's reported through to Audit and Risk or not, Mike.
No.
So, and certainly it's assumption based, and you'll see in the review memo an appendix there that highlights the track of actual positions or forecast or projected positions against those limits. And I think when you're talking through the financial strategy, it'll be very much front and centre in terms of the way that you think about your debt forecasts going forward in terms of maintaining your risk position within those limits.
Within both absolute dollar terms and percentage terms.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's thank you. So I'm still going. The fourth question is around smoothing of risk. So I think you talked about some 3 time-bound components in your slide. There were kind of
For debt funding, yes.
For debt funding, yeah. So how else is this done apart from being time-bound? Are there other mechanisms to smooth out risk that that are recommended?
Yes.
So, for example, your percentage of assets and amount of revenue and so on.
Within the policy, that's the key measure. It's time banded in a percentage.
Okay, so that's the only mechanism.
So it's going to limit you in terms of your maximum amount of debt you can have being refinanced and repriced within those time bands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. No.
So and there's minimums there as well that's forcing you to spread and smooth those maturity dates.
So it's
Yeah.
basically time bound.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm skipping forward through to page 40. Last question. So as Mike alluded to, and it may have been touched on, I may have been glossing through a document when you were talking to it, but under the investment policy, under both GasNet and NZICPA, for example, the third bullet point under objectives refers to enhance the value and moderate growth and investment for both of them. So we're in a situation where we're undertaking a CCO review, and it could be that the request and therefore the requirement of the CCOs changes to being instead of being moderate growth, it could be high growth, which comes with it a certain level of risk, and it could be different for each. This is not necessarily going to happen. We haven't discussed this, but I'm just thinking as we review the CCOs, we're going to go. There's likely that they're going to have a different risk profile, and therefore a different expectation in regard to investment for those that are commercially orientated. Given that that's pending, that review, and we are likely to review their risk appetite, and therefore that may be that this changes. So this policy changes. So is that...
I can respond to that. So what we've done for the policy of the review at this stage is look at the debt management side of things, and also the cash investments, which is your term deposits, on-call funds. The policy also covers other investments, such as property investments and what you've talked about. So that part of the policy hasn't been looked at, and in a Treasury function each month, that's not something we talk about in Treasury function. So we talk about the debt profile and managing the debt. The CCO review will bring out stuff around the CCOs, and then there's also that property side in there as well, which I think I've got in the item that hasn't at this stage been reviewed. So if that's all done before the end of June, that's fine. This will go up to the strategy committee, or it may be this goes up to strategy committee with just what we've got on the debt, and then as we review the other stuff, we then make changes to policy at that point in time.
Right, okay. So this is in draft until
This is in
30
draft.
June. Yeah, basically.
Well, until it's adopted by the strategy committee.
Yeah, sure. Okay,
Yep.
yeah, that's a better way to put it. Yeah, okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, thank you for your report. I noticed in your presentation that you have a monthly meeting with management and yourselves. Is that my
Yes.
understanding?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's just a short. That's
Yeah.
all I wanted just to clarify that.
Okay. Yes, absolutely.
So there's lots of opportunity to talk about these issues that have come up here and to consider whether some changes need to be made going forward as well through that relationship that we've got. Yeah,
Yes, it's an ongoing conversation,
good,
and certainly there's interaction intra-month as well.
good.
And it's all about strategy
Yep.
in terms of what do we need to be thinking about in terms of managing that risk
Yeah,
going forward.
thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. Councillor Kate?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, gentlemen. Were really nice and thorough, and I could understand quite a lot of it,
Oh,
but not all of
okay.
it. I'm particularly interested in this pre-funding debt,
Yes.
and you covered it in your presentation, but I'd like you to kind of go over it again in practical terms about how that decision is made. So that's one bit of it. The second bit is I note that they can be offset against maturing debt, and that's in addition to the policy, even if, and this is an assumption on my part, even if the term deposit is at a different bank.
Yes.
So I'd be quite interested in, I mean, I guess it's a very short-term thing, I would expect, but what would protect us from, say, taking out a term deposit at a different bank that, in the bank, like the BNZ did a long time ago now, but, closed its doors basically and wouldn't allow any term deposits or deposits to be released. So can you just talk me through, A, how you give the advice to make that call to pre-fund debt,
Pre-fund, yes.
and what protects us, this council, from deposits getting locked up should a bank get into trouble?
Yeah. So in terms of the pre-funding piece, and a good example is councillors' debt maturing in April 2024. What do we do with that debt? Because we know it's core debt, so it's going to be refinanced. And when it gets refinanced, it's going to be priced at a different margin over wholesale interest rates. So how do we manage or mitigate or remove that risk now, knowing that we are going to have to refinance that debt in 7 months' time? So what would drive us to a decision to pre-fund? And remember, the policy allows us to pre-fund debt that's maturing up to 18 months out from today. So things that we'd be considering is the current funding margin for that debt. Where is that debt relative to its current pricing, and where are margins, credit margins, at the moment? What is the risk around margins going forward? So one of the inputs there would be more bonds are going to be issued by New Zealand government and the LGFA than previously expected, and when there's a greater supply of bonds being issued, generally margins will increase. Okay, so that's a risk we'd want to be mitigating against. What do we need to be doing in terms of spreading and smoothing our future debt maturity profile? We can see over time debt is getting shorter and shorter, so it's all coming into that 0 to 3 year time band. So we need to be lengthening the term of our debt. So it's a constant activity we need to do, and the policy will drive timing around that as well. And we'd like to do that pre-funding, and at a time when markets are stable, not disrupted. So we've got a stable sort of funding market at the moment. And then we also think about when we raise that new debt, we receive the proceeds. We need, as we've talked about, we put that into a term deposit. It could be with any bank, right? And generally we'd put that with a bank that's providing us with the highest term deposit rate. We know that when we have a term deposit, which is 6 months or less, the banks aren't paying a very high rate for that. The banks like to have term deposits that have a term of 6 months, and greater. So that does sort of encourage us to pre-fund, you know, not too late. So sort of get in that window. So that's some of the thinking that goes through it. And then, as Cam says, you get a big tick on your liquidity factor from Standard & Poor's when you're sort of pre-funding upcoming debt. So it's an activity that you want to be reasonably habitual about, and the rating agencies will want to see you actually doing it, not talking about it, but actually doing it. So they talk about a contracted sort of term deposit. So that is also in the back of our minds as well. So that's policy driving it, it's market influences that are driving it, and it's also sort of credit rating considerations as well. In terms of that money, where do we place that money? Generally, we'd place that money with the bank that's an approved bank counterparty, so it's a very strongly credit rated bank, like an ANZ, a BNZ, a Westpac, for instance. And that sort of falls into your counterparty credit policy, which sits within your investment policy. That says that you can only have up to $30 million of risk sitting with one particular bank. So the way that we're managing that risk around default is that we're sort of spreading our risk across a number of different banks, and that limit has been calibrated to sort of encourage that sort of behaviour, and that's something that we are sort of actively considering when we think about where that money is deposited. So that's probably some of the sort of background and context to how we think about debt pre-funding.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask another question that's probably an opinion more than anything? I mean, it wasn't that long ago that everybody thought South Canterbury Finance was the bee's knees. Do you think generally things have improved in terms of monitoring our banks and finance companies so that could never happen again?
Yeah, so we don't put any monies with finance companies. Our money is with banks that are highly credit rated. So as Cam says, it's AA minus, stable outlook. So they're very strong, those banks. Certainly the Reserve Bank of New Zealand is asking the banks to recapitalise themselves, to hold more capital, to manage against, I think it's a 1 in 200 year shock. So, and it was really interesting during COVID that the credit rating agencies did not downgrade our commercial banks, and one of the reasons for that is that they're pretty, in terms of the risks that they take, a lot of their risks is lending, mortgage lending and corporate lending and the taking of retail term deposits. So from their perspective, they saw New Zealand Sovereign and our banking system as being reasonably sort of robust. So I have probably a positive outlook on our banks, our commercial banks. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Do I make a comment?
Very briefly.
Yeah, this pre-funding of debt's all come around predominantly because of Standard & Poor's. They put a lot of emphasis on the fact that you should not have a refinancing risk. And I'd argue, as you do rightly, is there's that risk, but there's also the risk of a counterparty, because you're actually putting money with a less creditworthy counterparty, and they have driven the market to do this, and while there's some merit in it, I would I have my doubts like you do with it as well.
Can I come back? Can
Yeah.
I?
Yes.
I mean, it's about prudence, though, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's about being able to afford into the future, basically. And it might not always get you the absolute best, cheapest answer, but it's about prudent stewardship.
And I think the active management that you've talked about, working closely with council, with your market knowledge, all of those things that comes to bear here. So thank you very much for your presentation. We do need to put the motion, and this is us contributing to this, or this committee contributing to this policy. There are some suggestions that have come out of it that will be considered, and we'll come back in some way to this committee to say where they went, and will be referred through to the Strategy and Policy Committee to finalise the Treasury policies. Yep, that's great. Thank you, Mike. So the recommendation is that the Risk and Assurance Committee receive the report, the draft Treasury policies. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Kate. Mover and seconder, Mike Timmer. Thank you. Any other comment? All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time today and all the work that you do with the council, and we look forward to that continuing and adding value as we move forward in this space. Very difficult sort of times, really. So we appreciate your advice. Thank you. I'll let Mike, you'll go. Yep. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Internal Audit Charter, and I'm going to take this as read. This is a review of the Internal Audit Charter for 2023-26 and just some amendments to it. I'd just like to, Debbie, I'm just going to move it straight forward. So are there any comments or questions about the Internal Audit Charter? Just noting that this is going to go to the council to be actually approved, so it's our input to this at this stage. Any comments or questions on the Internal Audit Charter? Mayor Andrew.
Oh, it's just an observation comment, really. I mean, I don't know if it matters too much, but on page 55, 56 is the first circle is about the program, I think, and the second circle is about the is that about the actual delivery of the audit, or the actual carrying out the audit?
Correct, yes. The second one is actually the audit workflow, how the actual audit occurs, rather than the planning that goes into it.
So, yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Okay. Do they, and sorry, my other question on follow on from that, do they talk to each other? Because the timing, there's no timing on here. I'd imagine that you would do the first circle first to get your program in place, and then the second one is to execute. One follows the other.
That's correct.
Great.
And you'll also see in the next report that you've got is actually the program, that the next item is actually the program for this year.
Yeah,
So,
no, I saw that.
Yep.
Yeah.
thank you.
Great. No, good work, thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Oh,
Just
Councillor
one,
Josh.
thank you. Yeah, thanks, and apologies if I've missed the answer to this question, but just looking at the charter, it talks about conflict of interest, and I'm glad to see that in there. Presumably there's a procedure that flows out of an internal auditor declaring a conflict?
That's correct. It depends where you're outsourced to, and there is a conflict of interest process that is worked through both through the procurement phase and also through the appointment, using the term loosely, of the internal auditor.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Otherwise I will put the motion that, what is the motion? That the Risk and Assurance Committee endorses the Internal Audit Charter 2023-26 and recommends to Council that the Internal Audit Charter 2023-26 is approved. I have a mover and a seconder for that. Mayor Andrew and Kate, thank you.
I
Any
do
other
want to comment on it.
Oh, sorry,
Just very
a comment?
briefly,
Yes.
if I can.
Yes.
I think internal audit's really important, obviously, but so is the way that internal audit is determined. And I think the way that this outlines how it's worked up, it gets the letter of engagement endorsement by the Risk and Assurance Committee, I think is a good team approach to make sure that different perspectives are considered in the setting of, the internal audit program. So thank you for that.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks, Kate. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the motion? Oh, I beg your pardon. I got it. Kate commented. Thank you. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. Right. Debbie, and now we're on to the internal audit program for 2023-24, an update to the committee. So just a brief overview from you, and then we'll open it for discussion.
Thank you. Through the chair, this is the program for the next initially 12 months. It has been reviewed and endorsed by ELT. One key thing to note in here is the ability to resource the internal audit, and we all know that when we get to an internal audit phase, timing can be quite critical and crucial for the outturn. The program has actually been developed looking at, as noted in the reporting, guidance from the Office of the Auditor General and key topics that are out there. I'm going to take the rest of the report as read and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Mike Timmer.
Yeah, thank you for the report, Debbie. My question is relating to the appendices, Appendix 2, and on the right-hand side you've got talking about who the audit agency is there, and you've got Audit New Zealand used in a number of the boxes. I question whether Audit New Zealand has got a thorough enough approach in order to do those audits in the areas that you look at. I mean, Audit New Zealand does pretty high level review of things. Probably in the financial systems, they do probably spend a lot of their time, but a lot of these other areas, I would be very surprised that you can rely on Audit New Zealand to do the audit. In fact, I would also point you to their letter, which they say in their letter of engagement that their audit is in a thorough audit, and you can't. There's certain things you can't rely on. For example, they won't guarantee they detect fraud and a number of other things. So I just wondered the logic of putting Audit New Zealand there.
Through the chair, the logic of putting Audit New Zealand there is looking back over a number of years of their letters of engagement, and also the Auditor General's intent statements clearly defines in there the different areas that they look at. And we all know too that internal audit, you can't do everything every year, so you actually have to pick your battles a little bit. So where I've worked the function into the internal audit is what can be achieved looking inwardly at the business, knowing full well that we don't want to double up necessarily on things. Take on board your comment that there are times when Audit New Zealand won't go into the deep dives with this, but I'm reasonably assured, given the statements of intent that come out from the Office of the Auditor General, that over, say, a 10-year window, they are looking at quite a number of these items. And the internal audit universe is actually quite detailed. But happy to take suggestions on that. Thank you.
So I guess in the report, just taking your point, Mike, Debbie does say, are there, identify other suggestions as to any other future internal audit opportunities, and maybe given your comment in Debbie's response, there are quite a few where we say Audit New Zealand will over time. If there's anything that you see as a priority, maybe it's worth just referring that back to Debbie where we've perhaps said that it would be Audit New Zealand, or that's been really some time ago. Maybe we need to have another look at that. So Mike, there is that opening for you if you would like to provide feedback on that.
Yeah, okay, no, thanks, Susan. I take your point, Debbie. They do have their little focus areas. They looked at purchasing a while ago. I'm not sure what their focus this year is. I think it's asset revaluations, I think I read somewhere. They do have their little hobby horses from time to time, and yes, you're right, they do cover things, but I just think relying on them is probably not the way to go. But that's a personal view. But thank you for your explanation.
Thank you. Councillor Josh.
Thank you. Looking at Appendix 1 and just looking at number 2, which is around elected member payments, and casting my mind back to the results of the 2022-23 audit, might have been 21-22 actually, there was a recommendation around procurement, particularly involving when an elected member had an interest in a company that was tendering for a council contract, and us having not met OAG requirements in the past. Does this particular audit include that aspect of elected member payments, or is it just limited to remuneration and fees and things like that?
At this stage, it's actually limited to the fees and the remuneration authority determination, because as you're aware, that changes every year and goes out, and this is one area that actually has not been audited for a considerable period of time. It also segues very nicely into sensitive expenditure.
Okay. And just to follow on from that, you may rule this question out of scope, but can you remind me what the response from council / this committee was to that issue around procurement and elected members' interest?
Through the chair, I don't know if they actually came through this committee. I think it may have been covered off in another committee. I'm not 100% sure, but happy to follow up on that.
Yes, we'll go back and have a look and put it on our action list so we can get a response.
Okay.
I would have thought it was in, declarations of interest, but at another layer below that somehow through the procurement policy. But I don't recall that, so we'll check that and come back to you.
Yeah, it'd be
Cool.
good to
Yeah.
have it on as an agenda item for this committee in future.
I thought it was one of the outstanding matters on the audit, in our representation letter. But it doesn't matter. Come back.
We'll go back and have a look. Yep.
Perfect. Thank
Yep.
you.
Okay, any other comments? Otherwise, I'll put the motion that, right, I've gone forward. It's up there, that the Risk and Assurance Committee received the report, Internal Audit Program 2023-24, update to the committee. Thank you, Josh and Kate as a seconder. Any comments? All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Debbie, for that. Okay, we're up to the Chief Executive's Health and Safety Due Diligence Activity Report, August 23, David, and this includes the update on the CHASM report from last meeting as well. So I'll pass it over to you just as a introductory comments, and then we'll open up for questions. Thanks.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll take the report as read, but just to highlight a few things. So a lot of my activity now is focused on the implementation of the CHASM's recommendations from the big review we had done, and you can see how those are progressing in the table on starts on page 74 of the agenda. We have tried to assign a broad priority ranking to them, just so that we're focused on dealing with the most critical and most high risk recommendations first, and then working our way through, just simply because of the sheer volume in there. It's too much for us to go at all in one go. Beyond that, other activity from a due diligence point of view, where I've been getting out into the organisation to see how work is done compared to how we imagined it would be done, is spending time with our team, both staff and contractors, down at the cemeteries and crematorium, and then also spending time with our staff on the front counter during the dog registration season, just so I can see how they have to operate and the risks they face. Great opportunity for our staff and contractors to talk to me about how they actually experience doing their jobs, what makes things difficult for them, dangerous for them, so that as a leadership team we're well informed to know what needs to be changed and fixed to keep them safe. Happy to take questions from there.
Any questions? Yeah, Andrew.
No, I imagine there's a lot to follow up with in regard to the report. A lot of these are in progress, which is fine. Are any of more particular risk of not being done right now? I mean, I'm thinking about the Opera House, for example, and might be some others that are more. They all kind of, if they're in progress, look like they're all of equal priority. But are there others? Someone here that are more priority than others?
So there were a small number of risks that the Chazens teams highlighted, in particular around the Opera House and a few operational matters down at the port, that they felt were so urgent they didn't want to wait until they had to type up and release their full final report. Those were notified to me and the general managers for those areas on the day that they did their site visits. So for the truly critical, very high risk issues, those were actually actioned and completed at the time the site visits were done, or within a few days of the site visits. The rest of the activity is progressing well. I'm pleased to say that my comfort factor is starting to grow, knowing that we are making really good progress in a lot of these areas. The key area, I think, if you were to ask me what is the thing that keeps me awake at night, where we really need to focus on closing the gap, is it is around the permit to work system for our high risk, most dangerous activities. So having gone through the process of identifying our critical risks now, we know where we should have permit to work systems in place. We're about to start some work in terms of training people to be permit issuers and put the actual systems and the paperwork in place so that we can start to operate that properly and effectively. But until we've closed that gap, that's probably the one area where I feel we're most exposed at the moment.
And your assessment has come through as the priority 1, 2 and 3 at this stage, of where you see and the team have seen the sort of priorities. Yes, so I guess there is the opportunity for us to provide feedback on that if we thought there was some change to that too. Yeah.
Yes, certainly. If you think any of the priorities are misplaced, by all means, happy to take feedback on that.
Thank you. Councillor Kate?
Thank you. Thank you for the report, David. So as part of, I want to just report to you and ask a question, or to the committee rather, as part of my due diligence of how do we know that the Chief Executive is doing what he's saying he's doing, was I went on one of his health and safety tours to the cemetery and crematorium. I was, like, it was very low-key, kind of casual sort of affair. The questions were very open that were asked, I thought were very open questions. So from that I took a sense of comfort that the Chief Executive is doing what he says he's doing. And I say that somewhat with tongue-in-cheek, but that is one of the priorities that we, that at least at the Institute of Directors are charged with. How do you know what's happening? Because they say what's happening. And there was quite a bit of discussion about transfers, and David's quite right in that there is going to be a new trolley purchased that will minimise, and maybe a ramp made to minimise the risks to workers' injury. And so I thought the next kind of phase of risk on that is, like, David came with fresh eyes and could see that that would be a relatively easily fixed issue. So how do we, or what is happening in terms of cultural growth at this organisation, particularly with our managers, with anybody, that encourages them to look at situations, especially in terms of worker safety, that will bring those fresh eyes and at a relatively low cost solution to what might be a safety issue. I know that's a bit smaller than what you were just talking about in terms of your permit issuing, but it's an important thing nonetheless, I think.
So through you, Madam Chair, whilst the monetary scale may be smaller, it's actually critical to our success, is that culture building piece. And I was going to talk a little bit about that on the next item with the health and safety dashboard. But part of what I'm seeking to achieve through those site visits is not just ticking the box and complying with my due diligence responsibilities, but also through those conversations trying to encourage and empower staff to look for those small opportunities where it's within their gift and their own budget capacity to make the improvements without having to seek permission from the chief executive or a general manager. That needs to be, though, reinforced with an organisational and a systemic approach to culture building. So our health and safety manager has already started work on a new health and safety strategy for the organisation. That will be underpinned by leadership and behavioural expectations that are supported with training for managers, so that the whole organisation can gets the tone from the top that we need to be proactive in looking at risk, looking after our staff, and where the small opportunities are and people feel empowered that they can take action themselves, where they aren't empowered because it gets into that too big or too hard category. There's clear escalation up to management that are receptive and responsive and take prompt action when they're told about something.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Peter?
It's to our David. And when I was a consultant for lean manufacturing, the first thing I did was to concentrate on health and safety, because it's non-threatening. It empowers the people. It's a real cultural driver. So I understand that you are driving lean principles through there. So yeah, it's that cultural change will start with health and safety first.
I think that was a question where you finished saying, wouldn't you agree? And yes.
Great. There was only one question I had, David, which was around, and I'll mention it to you, just about the staff in our reception area and their safety. I've been in there a few times recently too. I have got a dog and I've got a mother who needed rates rebates. So I've stood in there and watched as well as to what's going on, and I just recall having worked in frontline sort of organisations before, some minimum sort of safety standards for people, like panic alarms and their ability to escape quickly. Are those minimum level sort of safety requirements available to staff at the front line there?
So through you, Madam Chair, this one's a bit of a work in progress, and as our conversation was before this meeting, it kind of falls between a priority one set of actions and a priority two. So in the priority one camp, we have already started to bring in a security expert who's been running kind of drills around intruder situations, making sure that staff know how to use duress alarms, those kind of things.
Okay.
So the quick action we can take is already being done. The longer term action, we'll be looking at how we could potentially reconfigure and redesign some of that space. We need to look at closing off and putting additional barriers of security in, so that there isn't free access for members of the public from the front reception area into the back office spaces. That'll take a little bit more time because it's a bit more costly and a bit more planning's required before we jump into that, but it's already underway in terms of the early stages of reviewing that and seeking the advice so that we do a good job and finish with a well-designed space that keeps our staff safe.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments, questions before I put the recommendation? Okay, we've got the recommendation up there, and Kate has moved it to receive the report. Seconder, Mayor Andrew, thank you. Any comment? All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Now, we were going to meet Olivia, the new Health, Safety and Wellbeing Manager, but she's unfortunately unable to be here today. So, David, this is the first of the dashboard reports from her early work. Can I just pass it over to you to explain what it is to us and then what we'll see going forward? Thank you.
So, through you, Madam Chair, as an executive team, we have started the process of receiving a monthly dashboard on our health and safety performance, and I am keen to provide visibility of the information and the trends that are going on in the organisation to this committee, and also to the Operations and Performance Committee in due course. It is an evolving dashboard as we fill our data gaps, start measuring things that we haven't been measuring in the past, etc., etc. But this is the first iteration where we are starting to really see the impact of bringing Olivia on board as our new health and safety manager, and the dedicated focus that she's been able to provide by being solely, dedicated to health and safety. Debbie, as the previous risk manager and health and safety manager, did a fantastic job, but with a broad portfolio, with spread too thin to really make the improvements we need at the pace we need to do. So Olivia's brought a strong focus on the culture building side of things. It was one of the recommendations from the Chazan's report, was to make sure that skill set was really strong in whoever we appointed to that role. And what you can see reflected in here on the dashboard, the number of PeopleSafe reports that have been reviewed and closed, a significant number of, we call them stories, but they're like near-miss reports, actions that have been outstanding to address issues from incidents and near-misses that have previously been reported have now been actioned and closed out. So some of that reporting culture is starting to grow. I'm pleased to say that the August figures that we've recently received as an executive team are showing that continuation of the trend and showing a good steady influx of our staff proactively reporting issues through to us. So as a leading indicator around how our culture's building and how our health and safety performance is tracking in a positive direction, those are really good positive early signs. I'm also pleased, as you can see on the bottom right corner, our recordable incident frequency rate dropped to 0 in July for the first time. So that is, again, a good outcome, but nothing to be complacent about. There's a lot more information that the executive team have got that sits behind this, but certainly those key trends in terms of positive signs that we're building a proactive reporting culture are starting to emerge. As we go forward, some of the future dashboards are going to start separating critical risks, those risks we've identified as being the most important, that need the most management, such as I say working at heights or working in confined spaces, where if we get it wrong it can cause very serious injuries or fatalities. If we get incidents or near misses relating to those particular risks, they will be separated and highlighted, and Olivia is working on implementing a new incident investigation process, so that when we do have those incidents involving critical risks, we bring a robust investigation methodology to bear, so that we can learn as much as possible from those incidents so that we don't repeat them again. So again, those will be part of our lagging indicators around how we have performed, that get paired up with those leading indicators that indicate how well we're tracking. Happy to take questions from her.
Mayor Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, David. No, it's great to. Must be great to have Olivia on board. My question's really around the reporting. This is two-edged sword, really. If there's nothing to report on because everything's going well, that's great. But do you feel sometimes reporting drops off because people don't have the confidence or the safety to report? So, which side of the sword do you see this as an organisation?
Through you, Madam Chair, look, you're absolutely right, and it probably speaks to my comment about not being complacent. On one hand, I get some confidence that we are getting a steady influx coming through of near misses and those things being reported. And the feedback from our staff is starting to grow in a positive direction in terms of being able to engage and get access to our systems. It was some of the recommendations from Chazans was looking at our systems. They're a little bit clunky and not the easiest to use, which could be a barrier for staff reporting. So you do have to take a zero incidence result with a note of caution and really understand what else is going on before you celebrate and say, haven't we done a great job? I know in organisations I've worked for in the past, we've always had a view that good health and safety performance doesn't happen by accident. You shouldn't rely on luck, and that it takes deliberate, purposeful training, culture building, and constant vigilance to make sure that you maintain really good health and safety performance. So, we're certainly not celebrating the July result and taking our foot off the gas.
I thought you might say that.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. What's the story?
So, through you, Madam Chair, a story would be, it's equivalent to, say, a near-miss report. Something has happened that had the potential to harm one of our staff members. We were lucky and it didn't, but we've recorded it as that free opportunity to learn from something before it happens again and actually causes harm. So it's just calling them stories, I suppose, is a way of trying to engage with staff and encourage them to tell us their stories, tell us about what happened at work today.
Yeah, no, I thought that might be the answer, as opposed to a Goldilocks, sort of something that's made up. And I assume that the staff and incident reports, they're in raw numbers, so over time we'll track by area what it might look like month by month, etc.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we're starting to split out incidents by areas of council, teams, departments. We also are beginning to do trend analysis on types of incidents and locations. One thing we've done in the most recent dashboard is start to separate out the incidents that occur at the splash centre involving members of the public, because there's a high volume of low severity incidents of bloody noses and trips over and skidded knees and those kind of things that creates a lot of noise that could mask more serious issues going on at some of our other locations. So really starting to be able to slice and dice the data to tell what's going on behind it. It also helps, to speak to the Mayor's point, in terms of looking at our reporting culture, because if we're not getting broad spectrum reporting from across the whole organisation, we can see if there's pockets that are not reporting, and then start to ask ourselves the question, what's going on in there? Is it because our performance is genuinely good, or do we have a reporting culture issue that we need to address?
Cool. Just a final one. I note that you said there were no recordable incidents in July, and yet we've got staff incident reports for July. Is it up to July? Is that what that's about? What am I missing?
Through you, Madam Chair, so the recordable ones, I should probably have explained this, would include things like lost time injuries, incidents that required medical treatment, so they're more severe, whereas the total incident reports, I think, that you're referring to in the top left is everything, including the low severity stuff as well as the more serious.
Yeah, you might have to explain it to me offline, because I don't quite get it.
If I can
But we've got
suppose.
threatening behaviour over here.
So what we've got is we have lots of reports of incidents coming in, but those incidents that resulted in someone being injured where they had to miss work or needing medical treatment, we had none of those incidents in July.
Okay, well, I'd suggest that we might need to rethink that methodology, because having the crap scared out of you
Yeah.
should be recordable.
So that goes to some of the improvements we've already made, and you'll see that next time through, where abusive, violent or threatening behaviour by members of the public is one of our critical risks, and those are being pulled out separately so that we have a focus on them. And if I may speak on that a bit further, at the moment that is the critical risk where we're getting regular incidents that it's standing out as the clear focus area of how do we keep our staff safe from our community and customers, particularly in those frontline areas of the traffic wardens, the customer services teams and our animal control teams. They seem to be for obvious reasons, the hotspots that are really attracting it. But out of all of I think we've identified nearly 20 critical risks that we need to keep a close vigilance on. That is the standout for regular incidents occurring.
Sure. I would like you to think about it, though, that in our reporting mechanisms, we're not putting intimidation, being significantly intimidated, and maybe not needing to take time off work as a critical issue.
Yeah, through Madam Chair, for clarity, we are saying that it is a critical issue. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Great to have the dashboard. It's really good, and the discussion has been really helpful, and I know that you're continuing to develop it. It will go through the Operational and Performance Committee, but I still think it would be really useful for us to see it at our when our meetings come up, and it might be 3 months worth or whatever that might be, just to see the sort of trends that are going on, because it fits really well with the Chasm report and the priorities in there too. So thank you for that. Okay, I'll put the recommendation that we receive the report, the dashboard for July 2023. A move and a seconder, please. Thank you, Mike Timmer. And seconded by Kate. Thank you. Just in terms of timing, we're up to now the 5.6, the audit. Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry, I'm just trying to move things along, and I've jumped a step. Okay, thank you for moving and seconding. Any other comments on the dashboard? Thank you. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's great. Thank you. I can move ahead now. Okay, we're up to the audit information, which was quite a sizable chunk for us to read. And then we've got the insurance update. So I'm just looking at time now, and I'm thinking the meeting is scheduled to go till 4 o'clock today. So I am thinking we might need a 5-minute break in maybe after the audit discussion. We'll take 5 minutes if you want to grab a coffee or go to the bathroom, and then we'll carry on. Then we'll be on to the insurance. So at this stage, that's what the plan is, just so you know that everybody doesn't start leaving the room as we're sort of dealing with some of these important issues. So the audit, Whanganui District Council's annual report. Mike, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to make a couple comments on this. First one is around the level of the audit fees. I've talked in there about a remit going through LGNZ, that sort of stuff. I've got in here sort of 3 reasons, or key reasons why audit fees have increased. One of them is the complexity of accounting standards. The others is the increasing scope of the audits, and the third is the cost associated with auditor shortages. So when I was thinking about this here, and realistically, this was in the national papers a little while ago. talking about the audit fee increases across the country, and even those that get audited by the big four accounting firms are seeing this level, if not higher, increases in audit fees. So the opportunity to reduce audit fees, probably the only way that it can be reduced, and probably only a marginal way, is through reducing the scope of the audit. That is those non-accounting functions, non-financial information that is audited. I was reading an accounting standard this week, which I'll talk about in my next point, and I was reminded again about how complex accounting standards are and how they're getting more complex every single year. And so the effort required to audit that is increasing, and I'm not sure if the accounting profession is doing itself much favours in that area. So that's the audit fees. I want to jump down to the outstanding audits. For holdings, the outstanding audits is from 2020 onwards. I want to talk about what's holding that up and a potential way forward. So with that audit, Holdings has a loan of about 970,000, I think it is, through to NZICPA. That loan falls under New Zealand International Financial Reporting Standards number 9 for Holdings, and under International Public Sector Accounting Standards 43 for NZICPA. So under that standard, you have to define what type of financial instrument it is, which is a fair process in itself. And then you have to go through the question, should that loan be, should that financial instrument be impaired? Test for impairment. The directors believe that that loan will be fully repaid in that. However, you have to decide as of June 2020 were there indications of impairment. That is, were there indications that the full loan was not going to be repaid. As an intercompany loan, it was lent to a company, NZICPA, which has no assets. So there's no objective evidence that we can produce that is auditable, which backs up any decision we make on that. And so it puts audit in the position that they are unlikely to audit to pass that particular part of the financial statements of Holdings. That's what's holding it up. It's a really complex accounting thing. Regardless whether people care about it or not, it's another thing. The fact is, it's an accounting standards, it has to be done. So one option going forward is that Holdings produces in their annual report just group accounts. So under an annual report, you have the parent account numbers, which is Holdings, their transactions with all parties outside Holdings, which is both the subsidiaries as well as external parties. And then you have the group accounts, which is the combined financial statements of Holdings, NZICPA and GasNet, and they eliminate all the intercompany stuff, so that loan would be eliminated, and all you have is the transactions of the group of the outside parties. That is one way forward to get these audits over the line. It's not the ideal situation, but it is a way going forward. I have outlined this to the directors of Holdings. It is their call, and they, I think they are okay with that. Again, it's not the ideal situation, and I said that I would speak to it at this committee, just so this committee is aware of that before we go ahead and go down that path. We will see if there's other ways we can do it, but that's our last resort. So we want to get these over the line and move on. Now the question is, what about transparency to the community is probably a key thing. So what I envisage is that when the annual report is disclosed, which will be just the group accounts, you can have a set of management accounts of Holdings then disclosed, which has all of those things. That management report of Holdings numbers will not be audited. but at least it gives some transparency around the numbers. So, having said all that, happy to take questions.
Oh, I've got that it's Peter.
I'm Peter.
Sorry, it's come up as my Councillor Michael.
Mike, with regards to our dual set of books, is that not standard practice here?
Standard practice for most organisations is that with most companies is that you, in the audited annual report, you would have both the parent and the group set of accounts. There are some entities, Christchurch City Holdings Limited, who just produce group accounts, which is what's audited. So there are some companies around, council subsidiaries, that do this practice.
Thank you.
Councillor Kate.
Look, I'm sure you'll get through it and come to us with a satisfactory conclusion regarding that particular aspect. I have a question. I mean, most of it looks fine. You know, it's all very standard with what we see in other years. I'm just wondering about materiality level and the requirement to revalue our assets every year. I think that's what I read. And just wondering, given that the materiality is relatively high, actually, for balance sheet items that are not sensitive, why are we revaluing every year?
Yeah, so the revaluation is a requirement of the accounting standards. So for property, plant, equipment, that's revalued every 3 years, which is basically eroding our three water assets, most of our land and buildings, most of our buildings. That's revalued every 3 years, and then in between the 3 years you do a fair value assessment, and if your fair value of those assets have moved more than 10% during those 3 years, you've got to get them revalued. The assets classified as investment property, which is held for financial returns under the accounting standards, has to be valued every year, which is a lot of used to be harbour endowment assets, some of our city endowment assets that we make commercial returns on.
But if the materiality is, I think, 1.3 million, or maybe it's higher than that.
Materiality is when there's a mistake. Doesn't override the requirement of the accounting standards to revalue a certain class of assets every year.
So is it a full registered valuation each year?
It's most likely it's a desktop exercise.
So not that expensive?
No. Having said that, we also need to, that's not every year, so every year it's not going out there looking at condition assessment, that sort of stuff. No, it's more a desktop exercise. We are also conscious of the requirements to have good values for insurance purposes, so we've got to make sure every period of time we go and do those proper valuation exercises. But that's not every year.
I just wonder whether it's worth the expense, the additional expense. That's all, and it could be perhaps on our what do we call that schedule? Disagreed.
The overs and unders schedule.
Yeah, the over.
It would likely result in a qualified audit opinion because you have not followed accounting standards.
Yeah, no, I get tagged reports. I get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Andrew.
Yeah, look, I'm going back to the local government conference, and I spoke to the increase in audit fees. I don't know what's happened since then, so I'm keen to follow up on that actually. My question though is around those. Well, I mean, it's a 20% increase from last year, and a 38% increase in 2025 from the baseline of 2022. That is significant. So my question is around: is it possible, without too much reducing your risk exposure, to do, say, a baseline audit of the things that really need to be done, and phasing other aspects of the audit over a time period, if that makes sense. So you might do half of the discretionary part of the audit 1 year and roll the other half over to next year, and so it's kind of a 2-year rolling average rather than annual.
Look, I'll make a
just
few
checking.
comments. I know David will want to make some comments here. I mentioned before accountants were our own worst enemies. We produce these massively complex accounting standards, and they're getting just more and more complex. The one I spoke before about IFRS 9 was put in place when you had the collapses of financial institutions. So they reclassified financial instruments, and we as a council, as holdings, a small entity, is paying the price of that through what we have to do in our financial statements. So our increase in audit fees, it's cold comfort, but we are at the lower end of increases. Some councils, smaller councils, who are audited by the big four accounting firms, they're seeing 50% increases in audit fees. And I struggle with $300,000 at the end of 2 to 3 years. I struggle with that number. There are a couple of things we can do to slightly reduce that. For example, we will not get away from the audit of the financial statements and the cost of that. We won't get away from that. Because you've not only got the accounting standards, you've got the auditing standards. So you've got to change those, which is not going to happen anytime soon. What we need to do is make sure that through the non-financial aspects of the annual reports, we minimise what has to be audited. And we minimise that by completely reducing the KPIs we put in volume 2 of our long-term plan. So for a long-term plan, we come up with measures that we think are important for us, for the community to understand how we perform. Those measures that we think should be audited, we put in volume 2, and we'll audit them, which will come at a cost. Those measures we think we want to know these return. They're not mandatory measures. We want information on them, but we're not going to put them in volume 2. We'll still report against them outside the annual report to get compliance, but that will reduce volume 2, reduce the scope of that audit of the non-financial measures. So part of the long-term plan process, those who've been here a number of years, is to reduce volume 2 of a long-term plan, reduce those KPIs reporting. It'd be nice if the government would reduce some of the scope of their requirements. I raised a question, I think with David a little while this morning. Why should we have a consultation document long-term plan audited? Why do we go down all of these audit stuff? So, but that's something for the government to consider. It's not what we can do.
Okay, great. No, it's a really, really good answer. I was looking for really some ways that you might legitimately be able to reduce that cost, and it sounds like that word unfunded mandates just creeps into our lives day to day. Yeah.
David, I know you'll have some comment particularly about the audit fee.
Yes, so through you, Madam Chair, this morning I was able to join an online meeting that was being hosted by Mark Maloney, who is the Assistant Auditor General for local government, where he was explaining why the audit fees are going up across the board, and there was the opportunity to ask questions and challenge, and I was online with a number of my fellow chief executives from other councils across the country, all facing a similar issue. As Mike has said, whilst it's cold comfort, we are at the lower end of the spectrum in terms of the scale of the fees that some other councils are experiencing. The explanation from the Assistant Auditor General was that for close to a decade now, they have been effectively under-recovering the cost or the true cost of carrying out their audit function through the fees that they've been charging, and that under-recovery has grown and was compounded by them effectively holding back on fee increases during the period of COVID. So in their view, the increases in the fees that we're getting now are a correction to move them back to a full cost recovery model. As Mike has outlined, there's limited scope for us to try and reduce those fees because a lot of them are related to the accounting standards and the auditing standards where there isn't much in the way of discretion. The LTP and those non-financial measures are probably our main area. And if you look at the current long-term plan, I think we have almost 80 non-financial performance measures. So we have a lot of key performance indicators, and there may well be some scope to reduce those by targeting those measures that are genuinely key, and taking a view on some of the others, particularly if it expedites the auditing process and reduces some of the costs there. The only other opportunity that was really given by the Assistant Auditor General to cut our costs was for us to be better prepared for the audits and to provide the information quickly and timely. But given we already aspire to do that, it was not really much of an opportunity for us. The only other olive branch that was offered is because they are trying to step the correction in and smooth it over time. For those councils that are struggling, there is a possibility to renegotiate how quickly that correction is made and over how many years. That's a conversation we'll pick up with our auditor. But that's it, really.
Any other questions or comments on the audit papers? I just had a question, if I may. At the last meeting we had a summary of the outstanding audit follow-up issues that were raised, and I was keen this meeting to see how we'd progressed those and whether we'd been able to close some of them off. I know that they've gone through to ELT, and Debbie references it in her activity report, but I just wondered, you know, with the auditors here and this all underway, you know, where we're at. And David, I just wondered if you would be able to respond to that in terms of outstanding issues from previous audits. Thanks.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, I'll make a general comment and then hand over to Mike if he wants to add anything. When the last update report came through to the executive team a few weeks ago, we have, I suppose I gave some direction that we needed to go away and put some more effort into those audit action points that could be and should be rapidly closed out, either because we're willing to accept and tolerate a low level of risk, or because there are some quick actions we can take that actually address them. So part of the reason for not getting an updated report here today is we are in the process of doing quite a bit more work to try and expedite the closeout of a number of those actions so that we are current and more up to date. But Mike, if you want to add anything to that.
I guess just giving assurance to the committee that we do take those outstanding audit points serious, and once my team has, audits here at the moment for the annual report, once we got through the bulk of that, then we will be refocusing our attention back onto those audit points and what we can close out within those.
Thank you for that. I just we'll continue to see. I know you understand, but we'll continue to see, you know, outstanding issues. Agree, and I like the approach of thinking about can we, you know, manage this risk or accept some of the risk. But in our external accountability document, we will still see some of those outstanding issues. So there is a, would you like to say something else?
And through you, Madam Chair, maybe just I suppose to temper the comments that I've just made, I suppose some of the perceived lack of progress is maybe that we are over-engineering some of our fixes and controls, would be my view, and the team have done a lot in the background to progress things, but actually there's some for the level of risk available, there are simpler, lower key controls that we can put in place that, in my view, would adequately deal with the issue. And we need to stop perfection being the enemy of good enough, which I think is probably the reset approach you'll see from us next time we bring the report back. More rapid action where we manage things to within our appetite, and then once it's at a tolerable level, we call it done and move on, rather than trying to put in the belts, braces, and suspenders and chastity belt and everything else to make sure we're absolutely cast iron safe.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? No? Then I'll... Thank you very much, Councillor Kate. Thank you, Mayor Andrew. That's great. Any other comments? All those in favour? Anyone against? Can I suggest we take a 5-minute break and we'll come back to the insurance paper? Thank you. We're up to the item 5.7, the insurance update, and I'll welcome Vihan to the table. Thanks for your report. You can take it that we have read it, but if you'd like to give us a brief overview of the points you want to make, and then we'll open up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Viala Bashane. So, like Madam Chair said, I'll take the report as read. But a couple of things that I want to raise out is just as this is a report for your information. It outlines Council's current insurance policies and some of the processes that we go through in getting those. It also includes some of the key issues that we're facing. And also looking at what our internal capacity is to fund things if we do not have insurance on some of those items. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'll open up for questions. Mike Timmer?
You just had a question. You said that you were going to do some more work on your material damage business interruption valuation. I just wanted to know where you're at with that and your thinking around the new layer on that, because I suspect those values are quite light.
Through Madam Chair, yes, that is an exercise that we're doing, but the first step that we're working on is establishing an asset selection policy and choosing what assets we're going to insure and to what level we'll insure them. Once we've got that down, we'll actually look at what those valuations would be. We'll use an external party to review those for us. Yeah.
Have you got a date for that? And that'll all be done, because then you're exposed at the moment, not knowing what the values are.
Perhaps I can just add to that. So we have had some evaluations done on our property assets. There's two pieces of work going on. Vian has outlined one of key ones. The other one we're doing is updating our asset management system to capture the data for the property assets. So that's a fairly major piece of work, because we'll also need to look at the data we're putting into the asset management system once we've chosen the actual system in place. We've said in the item to the last committee that the asset selection policy will be completed in time for the 24 renewals. That will take quite some time, and that's working in alignment with the asset management system implementation as well. So I would think by 2024 is when we'll have that have those two pieces of work completed.
The extra layer of cover that we're looking at, what's the status of that? Is that likely to occur?
Work's still being undertaken on that. It's probably not going to happen. Is the initial thing. It's probably not needed is the initial feedback, but there's still a bit of work to go before that's confirmed.
Yeah, look, I'm just referring to page 141. There's a graph there which shows the insurance coverage, and I'm wondering if there's a 60% contribution from government there, which is fine. What is our exposure should a Cyclone Gabrielle-esque event happen? Oh, sorry, yes, I'm looking the wrong way. Yeah.
So realistically, it'll be dependent on what the actual loss level of loss within that event is. As this graph shows, central government has made a commitment that they will fund 60% of any losses, assuming that council is capable of covering the other 40%. So realistically, if there is an event, as long as it remains under our loss limits, we should be adequately covered to meet that.
Okay, because I'm just playing out how it's gone for the East Coast, and there's significant exposure there for not just the councils themselves, but also for the community as well. So I guess my question may extend beyond this here, and maybe something to follow up on, because I'm conscious that natural disasters do happen more frequently, and so when you're not in one, it's okay. But I know that from their perspective, they are really struggling as a community. I heard some quite horrific stories over there where where the councils could not cover because they had a shortfall, relying on central government, and central government were saying no. So I guess my level of comfort goes down to where the community are at, people losing their houses or not able to live in them. So it's probably something that we need to take away. It's interesting that Tim walks in now in the event of a disaster that would happen. In the worst case scenario, how would we be covered? So I think I'd be keen to take that as an action offline, if that's okay.
I think David's got a response.
Can I make a comment? Because I
Comment.
think it's really relevant to this. I think the nub of your question is it in the maximum probable loss calculation? Because what you need to look at is go and get the maximum probable loss report that you've got, and have a look at how that's made up. And it should have in there a cyclone, like Cyclone Bola or whatever, the Cyclone Gabriel or whatever it is, and it should take into account those things. So you would get some comfort from reading that report, and that report should tell you that things like that are covered.
Over to you, David.
Yeah. So, through you, Madam Chair, Mike is correct in terms of maximum probable loss. Scenarios would tell you whether we've got enough coverage in our insurance or not. It does get a bit more complicated than that, because you do then also have to look at the post-event demand. And as we're seeing on the East Coast with property buyouts and those kind of things, your demand after an event might be lower than it is before the event. So just simply taking your maximum probable loss is only part of the thinking that needs to be done here. But to speak to the Mayor's point, because I think he's perhaps conflating insurance coverage for the council-owned assets versus how do we, as council, and then by extension, how does central government support the wider community with their own assets that are lost? They are two separate things, and it wouldn't be in the scope of our insurance policy to cover those community assets. But it also does speak to, as you've kind of alluded to, as our civil defence lead walked into the room, around our civil defence capability, so that we can continue to operate to a high degree after an event, so that we're in a position to support the community really well. Some of that support will invariably have to come in the form of financial aid as well. And I think it's through that civil defence mechanism that we would be looking at that primarily, not through our insurance.
Yeah, no, that's why I wanted to sort of take it offline, because it's not in the scope for this. It's more the effect of our community, really, which is not covered under this rightfully. I get that. So
I think. Sorry. So I've given you the technically precise answer. It is a good question, and is something definitely that we should continue to have eyes on, and it's probably something that we should rediscuss when we get to Tim's item on the civil defence capability deep dive, around how do we factor in that financial capability to be able to respond post-event and support the community.
Yeah, thank you. I think it would be worth noting this just on our action items, whatever we discuss in the next item, because there's a lot of learning, isn't there, out of the sort of disasters that have happened, and I think it's important as a risk and assurance committee that we have our eyes on, what has been learned, and then how we might need to sort of reflect and act differently based on that. And while it will fall into the civil defence and emergency management sort of response, there's still a financial issue too that we might want to just make sure we've still got our eyes on. So I would like to see it just noted as an action item. Thank you. And Peter, you had a question?
Yes, and it's insurance to me is always centres around risk appetite. So are each of these items categorised separately for the risk item. And I give an example, say the cars and automobiles. Now, when I was in business, we just bought cheap cars and just insured a third party, so that if we crashed them, we just bore the cost and bought another cheap car, rather than buying a Rolls Royce and insuring it for its replacement value. So I was willing to take that risk. So does that apply to, you know, say like the fine arts, motor vehicles and things like that here?
Through Madam Chair, at the moment we take a very legacy approach with full insurance on most items. It's a very young approach, if I can use the term, or very, it's not a very mature term. Council, or we're working towards becoming more mature in the sense that we're utilising the asset selection policy to decide, what is our risk appetite? What are we willing to accept as a level of risk? At the moment, our policies are broken down. The various policies have different levels of cover, depending on what they are. So, to use your example with vehicles, it is for full replacement of the vehicle, or depreciated value of the vehicle, whatever it is at that time, which is kind of considered industry standard at the moment, and it matches what the rest of the Whanganui, the MW LAS group is doing. But we hope to in future take a more mature approach by actually choosing which assets we're willing to accept more risk on.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps I
Mike?
can
Yes,
add to
thanks.
that. One of the big, it's a good question, one of the big cost increases that councils across the country are facing is in the insurance area. It's just going one way, very high. And in the insurance policy that we presented, I believe the last committee meeting, it talked a little bit about the risk appetite. And one decision that we will need to make at some point is how do we reduce insurance costs? We can do that just arbitrarily by making uninformed decisions, but what we're doing at the moment is following the policy, the work program on that policy, and so as we look at our asset selection policy through the 24 renewal, then councillors can make informed decisions about what they want to insure, what risk they want to take themselves, and those sorts of decisions. But I think we have to have that information in front of us to make those informed decisions, and that's what we're working towards.
Thank you. Question on our premiums. So I'm interested in understanding to what extent our behaviours or practices impact our or could have the effect of bringing down our premiums. So, for instance, if I take fine arts as an example, to what extent would us moving into a redeveloped and well invested gallery impact on the premiums for fine arts, the quality of the storage facilities and things like that? Does that have an impact on the premiums?
Through Madam Chair, yes it does, but frankly the biggest indicator we're finding is just how hard the insurance market at the moment is. Some areas are definitely a lot harder than others, and we see the increases are more significant there. Other areas, the market is softening. So an example would be in cyber insurance. That's actually gone down in the past 12 months, just because there's been less events within the council group in that regard. We are getting some guidance from our insurers around what information we can provide that gives more comfort to the underwriters, and then we'll allow them to price those premiums accordingly or lower. And that's part of the work that we're doing in trying to establish exactly what the schedules look like, what the assets are, what the risks they are, because historically there's been a lot of assumptions built into those, and insurers tend to take the conservative assumptions and assume worst case.
Sure.
So the more we give them, the more comfort they have.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, if I can just add a quick comment there. One of the pieces of work that Aon has been working with the MWLAS group is the quality of information we provide our insurers, particularly Lloyd's of London when we go to overseas markets. And so we have been providing, the quality of information has been improving over the years. It's a little bit ironic that through, for example, the Three Waters, we know that the unit prices have been increasing over the last few years, and we did a very comprehensive valuation last year, was required for our annual report, so we have this wonderful updated information which showed the cost of replacement of assets had skyrocketed, and so guess what happened to our premiums? They went up because asset prices have gone up, so our premiums went up to cover those assets. So double-edged sword, get good information, but if it shows your assets are going up in value, your premiums will go up as well.
Just clarification, you mentioned insuring on depreciated value. Was that a mistake, or is it replacement value?
Through Madam Chair, so it depends on what the policy relates to. With vehicles, I believe they only pay out to what the market value would be for that vehicle, based on its age and utilisation and whatnot.
Okay, so that was an example based
Yes.
on the car example,
Yes.
not on our equipment.
No, so for things like infrastructure or buildings or like, it's generally on a replacement basis, yes. Sorry.
No, that's thank you.
Good to
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Thank you. Seconder? Thank you, Peter. Any other comments? All those in favour? Anyone against? Carried. Thank you very much, Lehan, for your report, and we look forward to future updates too, so thank you. Okay. All right, we'll move on to the top 10 strategic risk report. It's in front of us. Debbie, very clear about what's shifted and where that's at. Is there any other points you want to make before we open it up for discussion?
Thank you. There's just one point to make, that at the moment ELT will be looking, in the month of September, as referenced in the report, at their strategic risk. So those are the strategic risks in this top 10 from the review that was held in February. You will note in their reference to the future for local government, etc. Unfortunately, it's just the timing of everything that is happening in the organisation, including the timing of this meeting. So for the December meeting and following the workshop, which we are going to be looking a little bit more in depth at strategic risk, you will have the full updated risk register.
Yeah, sure. Oh, you need to go. Oh, I'm sorry, David, yes, you've got a point to make. Thanks, Debbie.
So
Yeah.
I was just going to also say, when you open for questions, we do have 2/3 of our executive team here today to talk to their specific risks. So feel free, if you have questions about any individual risks, if they're here, we'll call them up. We do have a couple of absences because Sarah and Catherine are tied up with other business, so they couldn't be here, but you've got the rest of the team.
That's great, thank you. And we do appreciate you being here. And Debbie, noting that, you know, this is slightly old now, and our discussion earlier around, you know, how do we look at some of the bigger risks, and how do we keep an eye on that, and to sort of make the whole risk management framework, rather than backward-looking, much more dynamic and forward-looking. So we'll talk about that at the workshop. But yes, I've got some questions, but I'll open it up for comment. Any comments or questions? Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, look, these are obviously high-level summaries of the risks, but I'm interested in community engagement, why that's been elevated into the top 10.
The community engagement one was elevated per the last review. The risk owner of that, I believe that's you, David. Can you comment on that? Put you on the spot. I'll pull up the...
Bear with me, I'm just downloading my memory banks. So, through you, Madam Chair, if my memory is correct, the reason that this was previously elevated was, I suppose, twofold. One, identifying it as I suppose a source of risk to council in terms of how we engage with the community effectively, particularly when we're communicating on large material or significant matters. But then also, as we had it, I suppose it's also a product of the time we find ourselves in terms of a lot of reforms going on, where we need to bring the community along on a change journey when we know what's going to happen to us, and then also heading in towards the long-term plan process, where we have some quite big engagement pieces to work through with the community. We're in the process of consulting on Māori wards as well, so big crunchy issues that would elevate the risk around doing community engagement to a high standard.
Right, so that was my question, is it to a high standard? Because it could be to anything, to lots of things. It could be to safety, it could be to not enough understanding from the public, that we're not providing that understanding. Yeah.
In the full risk register, there's quite a lot more detail that sort of explains some of these. So this is just the top 10 and a sort of summary report. But as I mentioned earlier, Debbie's sort of developing a dashboard that will give us sort of good high-level information going forward on these. Are there other questions, Mayor Andrew? Did you have any?
No, I did refer to, for example, on page 153, it does refer to, for example, the International Association of Public Participation, which has probably got standards in it and that kind of thing, so I assume it's measured against those standards. But no, all good. That's fine, thank you.
Great, thank you. I just had a question about our number one strategic risk, which is the one about the labour and material shortages impacting on delivery of key capital projects. I mean, I'm aware of how that's probably playing out in the Sargent project and the port, in those sorts of areas. But I imagine we've got, have we got a standard methodology for contingency in all of our projects going forward?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, that is one of the gaps that we need to close as we implement our new project management and budget setting methodology. So no, most of our projects and budgets do carry a contingency, and whilst we don't have a consistent methodology for determining what that should be, I'm not overly concerned that the contingencies that are being provided in our budgets are inappropriate or not fit for purpose, or in any significant way.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, Councillor Josh?
Yeah, just going back to the community engagement risk and trying to formulate my question as I process it. I guess it's around the scope of that risk, and I'm thinking particularly around risks to staff in the process of engaging with the community, conscious of how much heat there is out there at the moment around political issues, particularly race-based issues and things like that. Does this particular risk have the scope to include, I guess, staff well-being and comfort when they're on the front lines actually talking to the community about some of the stuff?
So through you, Madam Chair, this particular risk does not. We do monitor those kind of risks separately under our health and safety risks. That particular risk, as far as it relates to our community engagement, I don't believe is needs to be escalated up onto the top 10 of the strategic risks at the moment. We have a reasonably good suite of controls in place for those. And the other point I'd make is we do need to be careful about bundling too much into the scope of these risks so that they become an omnibus of all sorts, because it really muddies the water and makes the individual risks unwieldy to manage.
Sure.
So it's better to be very clear. This is about the efficacy of our engagement practices. Safety of our staff when they're carrying out those engagement practices is a separate risk in and of itself.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So ELT got off really lightly.
I just
I've got a minor one.
Oh, sorry. you might not have yet.
It's probably more language than anything. It's possibly a little bit picky, but it's to the heart of the whole risk management process to some extent. It's risk. It's the one that David owns. Risk number 3 or SR 63.
Yep.
It's organisational planning, and my comment just relates to the wording in the box under the rating comment. And we've got language there that says should be, using should be and 2 or 3 times in there. While I understand that that's what you want to do, would it be better to put to be? Should just says, well, yeah, I'm not sure whether we're doing it or not, but it'd be kind of good to say, yes, well, that's what we're going to do. I sort of struggle with it a bit because it is a risk treatment, and it's something that you want to do, so I guess that you could say that it should be. So,
Debbie's got a response. Yeah.
Noted, I'll make sure that it's amended for the next iteration of this.
Yeah, and I take your point. It's like this is what should be happening. What is it? What is it that we're doing? Yep.
And also noting that the rating comment is a summary of the ratings. The rest of the ratings can be reviewed in the full strategic risk register.
Yes. Cool. Thank you. Okay, I'll then put the recommendation. Can I have a mover and seconder for it? Peter, thank you. I can second it. Thanks. And any other comments? All those in favour? Anyone against? No, that's carried. Thank you. Thank you, ELT, for all your work on that. And Debbie, yeah, appreciate that. And we're now up to the Civil Defence and Emergency Management paper. And welcome to Tim. Nice to meet you, Tim. Oh, and Lance too. That's great. Thank you. Okay, so you can take the paper. You can trust us that we've read the paper, and but if there's anything you'd particularly like to highlight for the committee, that's useful at the beginning, and then we'll open up for questions. Thank you.
Just mainly acknowledging some of the other members of our civil defence team that are in the office at the moment. We have a number of our local controllers that are here, also intelligence managers, members of our comms team, and of course our risk team.
Right.
So we are a team environment, and I'm open for questions.
Cool. Great. Thank you. Okay, so we requested this, and I know that you've reported to full council, but given the experiences in Auckland earlier in the year and Cyclone Gabrielle, it just from a risk and assurance perspective, it was really important for us to be able to assure ourselves about the processes and I guess the learnings from those other disasters as well. So I'll open it at this stage for any questions or comments. If anybody has anything. Mayor Andrew?
Right. Yeah, look, as questions or comments, so the first thing I'd say is well done to you and your team and the wider team and the Whanganui community for the exercise, the simulation exercise you did a couple of weeks ago. I attended that, and I was impressed by the buzz and the deliberate approach to that event. People seem to know what they're doing, and you've taken some lessons learned. My comment, which I've also fed back to you as well, is that I'm keen to ensure that there is a clear understanding from elected members of what they should be doing and shouldn't be doing, and I've passed that comment also onto the Horizons Emergency Management
Joint Standing Committee.
What is it called again?
Joint Standing Committee.
Yeah,
at
that's
the
the
moment.
one. Yeah, there's all these different committees, the Joint Standing Committee. So that on as well, because it did highlight that there is a lack of clarity around the role of mayors, as well as where they should sit and shouldn't sit, and even down to detail like that, but also the wider elected members, some who feel a need to want to help out and to be participating and visible, which is great, to show leadership, but sometimes that's not helpful. So I guess my comment is that I'm keen, as I've alerted you and Horizons in general, that we have clarity at governance level, elected members and mayors, of what's required of us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that work, the clarity underway, or you've...
That's a kind of a comment and a leading question, if you like.
Okay.
I'd say through the chair,
Yes.
the inclusion of the mayor on exercise and there are a number of other elected members who have put their hands up for different roles, particularly in the welfare side. I'm developing some welfare training for packages. We actually have packages for that, but it's getting the numbers up to make that training worthwhile and for that inclusion in those different roles.
So there is clarity coming through
Practice.
through process and practice. Yep.
Practice and observation and taking part clears up a lot of misconceptions.
Good.
And reduces basically those errors or potential for errors in that relationship.
Okay, that's great. I know. Andrew.
I've got a second question is there has been a number of reports released lately, and some are also in motion, like the Bush report for Auckland, and there, I think the East Coast report is coming soon. I think it's on its way. What I have seen, not from here, but from other councils, is a cursory perspective of that. What I mean is that they see it and go, "Oh, we're good with that. We're already covered in that area. We're fine." You know, it's like this the sense of assurance that I think is not necessarily justified. And I'd like to think that we start from a low base in our perspective of interpreting these reports and really challenging ourselves that we are indeed okay, as opposed to just making those assumptions and really test. I'm just keen to make sure that we really test it.
Yes, through the chair, I'm known colloquially as Doom, because of pretty much that's one of the reasons is that approach. It's one of my work nicknames. We read the reports, but we also go out. If you look for Auckland, I have colleagues up there. I spent a day sitting beside one of their controllers on a different training course. We look around and through. We have a critical eye of what we're doing, in particular with Anthony Edwards, with his EMAT team on the ground in the Hawke's Bay, as well as other members of our team, as our own interpretation. And then we come back and we analyse and say, what could we do better? We're aware we're judged on our next event, and continuing improvement means we shouldn't have that positive bias, I think is one of the terms they use, where you think, yeah, we're sweet, when we're always saying so what or what if, because from our perspective with that response is it's being prepared for the what ifs and not sitting there thinking that we've got everything right, always looking for the gaps. We are people of the gaps. So that is and always has been in the last 8 or 9 years pretty much our approach.
Great.
So that I can assure you on.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I'm not going to call you Doom.
David, you've just got a point, and then I'll come back to you, Peter.
So through you, Madam Chair, just to add to the answer to the Mayor's first question, we do have some planning in place as well through a professional development program that we're building at the request of the Mayor for elected members that will include civil defence training, so that we can make sure all of our elected members know what the expectations on them are during an emergency, and they're a valuable part of the team. So we certainly don't want to ignore them or keep them excluded from the process. On the second part, I would also add that Tim does a good job as well of making sure the executive team are engaged in those kind of reports. So I know the Bush report was circulated to myself and the executive team. I've certainly read through it beginning to end, and making sure that we keep some leadership and management oversight over Tim, support him to make sure where we do have weaknesses we can resource and fill those gaps as well.
Right, thank you. Councillor Peter?
Yes, thank you for the report and your thorough work out there in our community. My question is, there's a great emphasis on community centres as places to go in case of emergency, like marae and town halls and things like that. Is there, for a large-scale emergency, is there a large-scale facility, e.g. like the stadium, for where people can go?
Through the chair, we don't have a lot in our district. The stadium is one we've certainly included in some of our thinking and plans of a range of contingencies. If you want to look at what is probably a worst case scenario, would be the evacuation of people in tsunami risk areas. There isn't anywhere where you could put that amount of people in our district. There is a large scale mass evacuation plan at the regional level, which we would be basically going to region for that support. But there are a lot of smaller areas. Whanganui just simply doesn't have the capacity. And I'm also aware historically there is risk with putting all of your eggs in one basket if you look to New Orleans with the use of the sports stadium there, where there is a big risk of relying on one location or one or two big locations. We have a range of locations around the city and indeed around the district at the moment, and we really take that approach to the ones most appropriate or at best use we would open up. And those large scale events we would simply have to open them all up where they're safe and usable, and then we'll be looking at other contingencies. And that's probably going to be one of the focuses on our next exercise in November, is gaming this with our staff to see what they think and what they can come up with for ideas.
Yeah, it was. I was doing a field trip around the stadium the other day, and if you were to use that, it didn't appear to me that it was capable of handling large-scale people. You know, like with kitchen, food areas, looking after that sort of thing. It was just a thought at the time.
It's not just that; it's beds.
Yeah.
Toilet facilities. Part of my previous employment when it came to health planning was working out simply the people to toilet ratio, which is critical over more than a 24-hour period. But also for somewhere like that facility, you're only talking a couple of hundred people with those support things in place. There are other options talking with Defence with regards to Nangar Bluff. There's also, if you've got that outside support capability in Christchurch in 2011, they basically put up enough tents to have 500 families under tented accommodation in that event. As it was at the end of that event, I think 3 families took advantage of that, most people choosing to go to Hamner Springs or somewhere similar if they had to evacuate. But that's only what I physically saw from being down there. Cool. So yes, that's a concern for us.
Oh, thank you.
Just and adding to that too, Peter, there's also where perhaps historically the floods here, we've had more access to hotel motel rooms, so that's significantly reduced as well with the emergency housing position taking a lot of those rooms. So yeah, so it's a real challenge in that, and not forgetting too, if we're going to evacuate people to a building, it has to be at a certain standard, so we can't put them in a higher risk building after an earthquake, for example. So, and we lack those in this city as well. So that is a challenge.
Generally, it's about a third of the people you evacuate in most contingencies will need that sort of support. That's based on our river flood experience and some other more recent experiences.
Yeah, and how to get them there. You know, if all your roads are down.
And that's, you can try predicting that, but sometimes you're doing educated guesswork, although we've got some pretty good expectations of where roading damage and other things would be.
Cool.
Thank you. That's cool. Thank you. Councillor Josh.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Just putting my co-chair hat on for the Tamupuko link for a moment. I'm conscious of the work that you and your team are doing with some of those more isolated and vulnerable communities up the river, particularly in in terms of being cut off from a major flood or a slip or something like that. I think the rest of this committee could really benefit from understanding some of the work that you've done with those communities to prepare them for dealing with a disaster. Can you give a summary of some of the information that you've provided to the Tamupuko link over the last little while?
Okay, certainly through the chair. We've been working pretty much with the upriver communities now for 5 or 6 years, based on the principle of they've got ownership of their problems. We're providing that support, the advice. It is consequence-based, which for most of those communities is not flooding. It is, as said, being cut off, and communication issues. If we look at 2015, that was a fairly good template of their most common risk. And the community hubs in the upriver locations don't tend to flood or get damaged themselves. It's owned and run by the communities up there. A lot of it was resourced by key people that have done this. with our support, and we continue to provide training and other support with that based on them being cut off. So there's a comprehensive radio communications network. There are other backup communications separate over the internet. There is pre-designated helicopter landing zones for supplies, local community teams. We've helped provide training not only in civil defence and helicopter operations, but support to first aid training and civil defence training themselves through particularly the River Hub team, which has been our primary engagement. And that's been regarded, I wouldn't say gold standard, but it's highly regarded around the countryside as a way we've basically adopted the position of we're working and supporting with them to meet the problems they're likely to face. Each community has their own emergency response plan with their own context and the other details, as well as the information they need for their likely emergency events, what they need to do beforehand.
Good, thank you for that. I found the report really, really valuable, and I liked the fact that you were carrying out exercises, quite regularly. I think the big thing that came out of the most recent disasters from my perspective was the communication issue and who makes the call and when. And it just sounded like that was terrible in both situations, in Auckland and on the East Coast. So it's just being very mindful of that and how those decisions are made and communicated as early as possible to ensure that people can, to some extent, look after themselves for some period of time anyway and make decisions. So thank you very much for your work. I'm going to put up the recommendation if anybody would like to move it. Thank you, Peter, and seconded by Councillor Michael. Thank you. Any other comments? Everyone in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you very much for your report and for your work. Tim and Lance, yeah, thank you. Okay, Debbie, back to you with internal controls policy assurance overview.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to give the committee an update on progress with policy updates. I'm going to take the report as read and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Anyone got any comments or questions? Some of them look overdue to me, just to be frank. So some of them, the review dates, there's one, the protective disclosure, next review date was November 2020, just as an example. So what I'm saying is good work on some of them and we're still reviewing them. I can see where we're going next, but I would like a report back to show progress on some of those that are sort of quite outstanding now, or at least a plan of attack to make sure we get those in place, because these are a foundation for us, so to be assured. So everybody okay? That's what I would like to see next meeting, just as to where we're at with those. Any other comments? Oh, Mike Timmer.
So just a quick one there. If you've got you say it's under review currently, or because sometimes these can be under review currently, and they can be under review currently for years. So it's good to put a date on there, because that puts some accountability around it, and then it gives us some comfort that we know it's going to get done. Something gets measured, it gets done, and that's the basics. So it'd be really good if you could put that.
Yep. I'll ensure that the policy owners update that field themselves, so I can report through to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. That's cool. Okay. So a move and a seconder for the motion to receive the report. I'm happy to move. Mike Timmer will second. Any comments? All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Anyone against? Oops, I've gone the wrong way around. Anybody against? No, it's carried. Thank you. It's getting late. Right. The legal compliance policy review. So Debbie, here you've given us the policy that's been reviewed, and you've noted the key changes to that policy. Is there anything else you want to add?
Through the chair, just to note that this policy review was done on time.
Excellent.
As per the review schedule.
Excellent. Excellent.
And I will continue the nagging of others.
Thank you very much for that. And we've noted that it's been done on time, so thank you. And thank you for the team that did the work too, so that's good. Any other comments or questions about this? Oh, sorry, Mayor Andrew.
That's all right. No, it's, so on page 175, it's there's some responsibilities rather than responsibilities there. It's more of a general comment. So legislation is changing all the time, and to come the new, potentially a new government, and there is likely to be further legislation change, and I can see a whole raft of changes coming through. So how quickly is the turnaround? How easily is that managed? You've probably got some recent legislation that's happening with that's relevant to us, the affordable water, RMA changes, and so on. So, is that do we feel that we've got the capability and capacity to easily manage legislation changes?
I cannot talk directly about the legislation, implementing the legislation, but as far as having awareness of legislation change goes, the Legal Compliance Assurance Program, I consider and keep up to date with alerts from Parliament. So everything, whether it's a bill or when it's gone through to Select Committee, all the stages are actually noted in the assurance program, and then it is updated to the relevant area of council. And we also have, as referenced in the legal compliance policy, a system of risk assessment as to whether we're actually compliant with the policy or not, and a system of peer reviews, looking at particular elements within the policy, within the legislative instrument, as to whether we're compliant with that as well.
Okay, I'm sure there's a pretty robust process, but just asking.
Of recent times, it has been very time-consuming keeping up with the raft of legislation that has been pushed through in the last month.
Hence my question. Yeah.
Oh, Mike Timmer?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. First of all, every council in New Zealand's got this problem. I just wondered what the network was in relation to this. Is there a sort of, I know when I was in council, we were always trying to, being a regional council, we had our own set of legal things, and we all tried to work together to get a sort of a schedule going. I just wondered how you managing with all the other councils, because you're all doing the same thing roughly. So is there any sort of a process around that? I know there was Comply With, which is an organisation that did this stuff, and I just wondered where that is and how that all fits in into the process.
So through the chair, Taitoara offer a really good selection of compliance tools within that, in the legal compliance, and also keep updated with different aspects of that. So Taitoara is my go-to on a day-to-day basis. I don't use Comply With, even though other councils may or may not. It's not the tool that we use.
Okay. And my other question was the next drill down. So this is the policy. You must have procedures and guidelines in terms of the process. That's where the rubber hits the road. And my interest is, the legal requirements. There should be owners of all the legal requirements. Do you have that sort of thing that's happening? And it'd be quite good to look at it. Maybe in a workshop we could look at something like that. Just to see the next level down, because that gives me comfort that it's all being attended to. Because the policy is one thing. The next thing is the actual implementation of it.
No problem, that can be shared at the workshop. It is a massive piece of work with lots of owners, but happy to share the view of that at the workshop to provide you with assurance that we actually have that in place.
Yeah.
Could we put that up in Diligence somewhere where we could reference it? Oh, it can't? Okay.
The reason I don't want to actually put it in Diligence is actually a live document.
Okay.
So it's a live Excel spreadsheet. So if I have to, I can put that in there as PDFs or put a sample in there of PDFs, because it is quite large. So happy to put a sample of 3 or 4 pages out of about 30.
Perhaps
Of
give
all
us
the
a
legal
starting.
instruments, if that meets the requirements of the
I
committee.
think what we're looking for is assurance of process, isn't it? Really, not needing to go line by line. So maybe an example, I think would be good.
I'm not interested in are you complying with this law or that. I'm just interested in the process. I'm interested, have we got a good process in place? Is it working? Are the people on the ground taking responsibility? That's what I'm interested in.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's cool. Thank you. We'll have that as an action. Yeah, thank you. So will the Can I have a mover and a seconder for the motion? Oh, Peter, sorry, did
yes.
you have a question?
Yes, just a matter of, I saw Mayor Mr. Andrew leave. Do we still have a quorum? Yeah, cool.
Thank you. And Councillor Michael, thanks for seconding. That's cool. The Assurance Activity Report. Debbie, thank you for this report. Oh, didn't do it, did I? All those in favour? Anyone against? Carried, thank you. Right. Assurance Activity Report. Thanks for this, Debbie. And I was particularly interested in the work that you're doing, working alongside the team on the long-term plan and the leading edge strategy with the risk profiling. Is there anything you want to particularly highlight in here? Anything you want to add?
Through the chair, no, happy to just take the report as read as a summary of all the other random risk activities. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I thought it was really important to capture that we're actually looking forward in the long-term plan and the strategic work with a risk lens, and I think that's something that we need to be doing going forward. The other thing you'll note on page 179 is about the committee workshop on the 22nd of November. We've talked prior to the meeting about some items that we want to bring to that. If you have other ideas, we're really open to those ideas. We have got an external facilitator, and we will be shaping that agenda so that you can have a look prior as well and make any comment on that. So, yeah. Everybody okay with that? Any other comments? No? Otherwise, somebody to move and second. Thank you, Peter. And Mark Timmer is a seconder. Thank you. Thanks, Debbie, for that. That was good. And then there's our work programme. Oh. Motion. Anyone against? Does everybody agree with the... Yes, thank you. Against? That's carried. Thank you. Oh dear. Debbie, the committee work programme. I'd just like to say that this is a dynamic piece of work as well. So if you have things that you are particularly interested in and you want to see coming up, please get in touch with Debbie or me, because we can work on those. We are running more of an action item list where we are bringing things back and we'll add them to the work programme, but we want to keep this dynamic and responsive and making sure that we're hitting the right sort of strategic areas for our Risk and Assurance Committee work. So any comments or questions on the work programme? Yes, Mike.
This is just a thank you, Debbie. This is good work. Thanks very much. You've done a great job. Cheers.
Very good. Yes, that's good. Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Councillor Josh. Seconded, Peter. Any comments? Everybody? Is everybody in favour? Yes. Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. Oh, we've got to... Now need to move into the public excluded part of the meeting. So can I have a mover and a seconder to do that? Thank you, Peter. And seconded by Josh.